Today, AI is everywhere, and that of course also means inside Enterspeed. The biggest problem with AI today is not the models themselves, but to actually get the data and context needed in order for the models to answer the questions you have. I'm Jesper from Enterspeed, and in this video we'll talk about the Enterspeed Query MCP server and how Enterspeed can help solve these challenges about missing context. We'll go through a common use case step by step of all the things needed in order to connect the Enterspeed Query MCP server to your AI model. In this video, we'll connect both to Claude Desktop and through a custom Node.js application to showcase how the Enterspeed Query MCP server can be used to answer whatever question you have about the data that you have inside Enterspeed. Now, if you want to follow along, simply clone the public GitHub repo. This contains all the code needed, the Enterspeed schemas, and the dataset I use. You can grab the link down in the description. So here we are inside Enterspeed, as we need to set up Enterspeed before we can use the Query MCP server. Now the setup I'm using here is a commerce setup. So I have set up 3 sources here. One ERP source that contains 6,000 orders and order lines. Also have a PIM source where I have 100 products, and then I have a CRM system with 500 customers. So that's the data that I'll be using in this demo. The next step for you is to ingest the data, and if you go to the repo, there is a demo-data MJS file. So simply paste in the API keys that you got from your data sources that you just created inside Enterspeed, and then you can hit Node and run the file. So that's all needed, and then you will have that same data set that I'm using here in the demo. The next step, once you have your data ingested into Enterspeed, is to create schemas. So if I look at the schemas that I have created 4 index schemas, and they're fairly simply all of them. So if you just look at the order index, for example, you can see that I have mapped out the field that I want with the data type that corresponds to the data that I have. And then I have mapped out the properties needed in the index. So a fairly simple order I have here: order ID, customer ID, status, things like that. For now, the property names that I have here is fairly simple and recognizable even for AI models. But if needed, you could also add a custom meta description here, saying that the amount of lines on the order. Now, this kind of makes sense right here, but if your description and property name here is not that descriptive, you could add that description here, and it will be exposed out to the Query MCP server, helping the AI model to figure out which field is needed. You can also put the meta description right here on index level instead, describing what this index actually contains of data. Cool. So basically that's the schemas that I have. I have the same for order lines, products, and for the customers. And this will make sure to all the source entities that I have for these 4 specific types here will be imported into an index. The last step needed to do is go to settings, environments, and you need to create an environment client. The environment client is what you use to fetch data from Enterspeed, no matter if you're using the Query MCP or just our delivery API or Query API. But one thing that you need to be aware of is that you need to go to Edit Scopes, and here you need to enable the Query API, and you also need to enable down here for the MCP server. Without this, the MCP server is not allowed access to the indexes. You can also specify individual indexes that the MCP server is allowed to access. So that's everything needed inside Enterspeed. The next step is for us to connect Claude Desktop to the Query MCP server. So I'll go down here and go to settings, select developer, and here I can edit the config file for the local MCP servers that I have. open the file, and here in the MCP servers, I will just add the Enterspeed MCP query, and it has the API key that I'm using as well. So that's everything needed. I can close the file, and then I'll just need to restart Claude Desktop. So if we start it once again, and once again, if we go to Settings, Developer, we can now see that I have the Enterspeed Query installed. So this means that I can, let me just start, clear the session here. Now I can start asking Enterspeed questions about the data that I have. So a fairly simple question, how many orders do I have? So it's looking for the tools, and it tells me that I have 1,000 orders in my order index, and that's also correct. So if we go here and look at the tools found, so it found the query order index tool, and we can also look at the specific query it actually did against that order index. So it simply had a pagination with page 0 and a page size of 1, because it doesn't really need all the results, it just needs the total result count from the result. So it's actually querying quite efficiently against the Enterspeed Query API. I can also ask it to break down the orders by status. Once again, it figured out that it needed the order index in order to answer that question. And if we just unfold it once again here we can see the request that was actually made this time. So right now it's using facet. It's using the facets in the query and say, please build a facet on the status property. And once again, the same pagination as before. And now Claude Desktop, in combination with the Enterspeed Query API, can tell me how many orders do I have with the specific status in my data set. So this is really, really cool, but still fairly simple questions, as it only need to get data from the order index in order to answer this question. And the real power here comes with the multi-sources that we set up. So let's imagine you have data from your ERP system with the order, but you also have data in your CRM system for all the customers. In order to answer these kind of questions, you need to cross-check data across multiple systems, and that's where Enterspeed shines. So what if I ask a question, say, show me the top 5 customers? Now, in order to answer that question, it needs to go into the order index to find all the orders, but it also needs to go down to the customer index in order to find the customers. So let's just give Claude a bit of time here. So here we can see the result is starting to come in. So the top customer is Andreas. He has 8 orders with a total sale of 17,000 euros. And then we have down 6 orders, 5 orders, and the total price here is also going down. So this is a really, really nice query. So in many cases, users will not be working inside Claude Desktop. They will be working in a custom application or existing application where the user is already working and where they can answer question right from the context they are already in. And this is what we have here, a Node.js application, a custom Node.js application that hooks up to the Enterspeed Query API. So first off, let's just start the application so we can have a look at it. So it's starting up. We can see that it is connected and it has found 13 tools that is available, and the server is now running here. So let's start up this side. So here I built a chat application, you can call it, with a bunch of predefined questions. I can also ask my own questions, of course, if I like to. But the first one here, how many orders do I have? Please break them down by status. That's the same question that we asked to Claude Desktop earlier. So let's give it that question once again. And right here we have it, total of 1,000 orders, and 58% of the orders are completed, and so on. And we can also go here and look at the tools call. So it did one call to the tool called query order index. And once again, we can see the exact query made by the query MCP server with the facets by order status. And we can see the result as well. So that's the application. Now let's have a look at how it's actually built. So first off, let's go to, besides a single HTML file for the UI, we basically have only 3 files that are worth mentioning here. So first off, server TS inside the source folder. So this is basically our application. It has a API/chat endpoint. This is the endpoint being called whenever I ask a question from the UI. And it calls this function here called handle chat, which we will look at in a minute. Besides that, it bootstraps the application. First off, it tries to call the get MCP tools that will list all the tools available. And as we saw down here, it connected to 13 tools. And then it's starting the application down here. So basically, that's it for the server. Now, the next file that I want to show here is the MCP client. So up here, we're using the Model Context Protocol SDK client, npm package. And it has a get client function here. So that's basically connecting to the MCP client that we have. We can see here is using the Enterspeed API key that I have configured in my environment file. And then it's connecting to the MCP URL, which is hosted at Enterspeed, mcp.crew.enterspeed.com. It also has 2 functions down here. It has the get MCP tools. That was the function that we saw called down here. So it uses the client, which has a function called list tools, and it just maps out these tools and also caches them in memory here. And of course, it also has a function to call a specific tool. Once, in this case, Claude figured out which tools are actually useful for the question answered. So that's all for the MCP client. The last file is the chat handler. And the chat handler has the handle chat function that we saw called from the server and from the API/chat endpoint. Also, just want to mention it uses the Anthropic AI SDK npm package to connect to Claude. So what happens inside here is that it builds a list of messages. So it gets the current message, but it also gets from the request the conversation history. So whenever I keep asking new questions, it will build up that conversation and have the entire conversation as the context for the prompt. Next up, what we have here is something called agentic or agent loop. So I basically defined how many times do I allow Claude to loop. I think I have set it to 10 iterations here. So first off, it creates a message or calls the message endpoint on the Anthropic client, and it gets a response back. And the response can be of 2 types. Either it could be that the prompt has to stop here. There's nothing more to do. I got the answer. Just return the answer. It could also be that it figure out that I need to use one of the tools that is available for me. So right here, we will list all the tools that it finds useful. It will call each of the tools by the call MCP tool function that we saw before in the MCP client up here. and it will call that and basically push the response back here. And if we look at the message list that we built earlier, it will add the result back to that message conversation history and go back to the agent loop up here and do another iteration. So now it has more context, and it will call Claude once again with that extended context, and hopefully based on that be able to find an answer and return an end reason for the stop. It could also be that it, based on that context, needed to call yet another tool, and then it will continue in that loop iteration until it gets a end turn as a stop reason. So basically that's it. 3 files, each less than 100 lines of code. That's everything needed. I hope this little video gave you some insights into how the Enterspeed Query MCP server can be used, and most of all, the value it brings. I know it sounds like a cliche, but right now it's just your imagination setting the boundaries to what types of questions you can answer based on the data you have available inside Enterspeed. So be creative. That's it. Bye.